الحمد لله وكفى وسلام على عباده الذين اصطفى بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. Respected listeners, when I was contacted by one of the representatives of the DMU Islamic Society asking me whether I'd be able to come and celebrate Islamic Awareness Week with you here, I asked him whether any relevant topic would suffice. He said to me over the telephone that you could talk on whatever you like. When I came here today and I was talking to him in the Portland building, he gave me a topic which I can barely remember at this moment in time, but I think it's something in the region of Islam, a way of life. So obviously, some preparation has to go into a lecture. And I thought that glimpses of the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ's life would be very adequate. And also the fact that Muslims derive their way of life from their Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, I thought it would be befitting for this present occasion. Now, I've been given this device by which I can't move. I have to stay here. I'm in the habit of moving from one place to another. And the other thing is that I'm not so used to looking up in high directions. Obviously, we can't contact the designers of this room at this present moment in time. But I'll try and be as concise and comprehensive and as helpful as possible to put forward some of the aspects of today's discussions to you. So as I said, a way of life, and Muslims derive their way of life from the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ. And it's not a new concept or a new phenomenon to follow a great figure. If we look at places like India, we will learn that the Indians, they respected and revered Buddha. If we go to China, we will learn that Confucius was also revered and respected. In Iran, we have the likes of Avesta. In Babylonia, Abraham. The Jewish people, they believed in plenty of prophets. We have Moses, David, Jesus, etc. From a Muslim perspective, however, two distinguishing points there are two distinguishing points regarding the figures that I've mentioned to you. From a Muslim perspective, obviously, I'm not generalizing. They all claim to be bearers of divine messages, and they left behind sacred books. But after that, they followed wars, massacres, and genocide became the order of the day, which caused a complete loss of these divine messages. Obviously, this is a Muslim perspective, and I'm not generalizing. Now, when we want to learn about the Prophet, that science or the study of his life in Arabic is known as Sirah. S-I-R-A-H. Sirah. Muslims use that quite commonly, and it's specific with the life of the Prophet Muhammad alayhi salatu wasalam. When you use it in when you gather historical data or provide historical information about any other individual, then it is usually known as tarikh, and that is quite common, and history is what we would use in English. So seerah is specific for the Prophet Muhammad within the Islamic tradition, that when his life is studied, the name of the history and the name of the study is known as seerah. So seerah on its own will refer to the life and times of the Prophet Muhammad alayhi salatu wasalam. Where do we derive information for the seerah, for his life? We all read so many books on the Prophet. We probably read articles, we have glimpses, we read about his sayings, we learn about his deeds. All sorts of different things are passed on to us regarding the Prophet Muhammad. But where do we get all this information from? We have to first turn to the highest authority, which is known as the Quran. That is the highest authority in terms of all the sources of the Islamic tradition. So first and foremost, for information on the Prophet Muhammad alayhi salatu wasalam, we look to the Quran, and whatever the Quran provides us about his life story, we believe in. What other information can we get about him, and where can we get it from? The second source is known as the hadith. Now hadith, a lot of you will know what the hadith is. Hadith refers to the sayings, the acts, and the tacit approvals of the Prophet Muhammad. It's documentation of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So that is the second source for the seerah, from where glimpses of his life and the times of the Prophet Muhammad alayhi salatu wasalam can be deduced. And the third source, major source, is known as the seerah literature. The seerah or the maghazi literature. Maghazi, you don't need to know that, it's probably very technical, but seerah literature is the third source of information from where aspects of the life of the Prophet Muhammad alayhi salatu wasalam can be deduced. So you've got three sources. The first, the Quran. Majority of you will know that Muslims believe that it is a divine message given to the Prophet Muhammad alayhi salatu wasalam over a period of 23 years. Then there is the hadith which I mentioned, and I described what the hadith was to you. Hadith and the seerah literature are basically very similar to one another in nature. There is only a slight difference between the two. The first one, i.e. hadith, they are arranged according to doctrinal, juridical and legal topics, or according to the original transmitter of the report. And this again has a lot to do with hadith studies, technical issues again. The seerah compilations are arranged more or less chronologically. So in the hadith literature, when you're looking for information about the Prophet Muhammad, you will find information classified according to different subjects. So all the sayings and the deeds of the Prophet regarding the manner in which he observed his salah, his prayer, will be in one particular area. All the information about how he used to fast and the rules of fasting in another area, and so on and so forth. That is what we learn about the hadith literature. In the seerah literature, which is also another source for the information about the Prophet Muhammad, we learn in that things about him are discussed chronologically according to how they occurred. So aspects of issues that took place before his birth will be mentioned in these type of books. Then what happened during the time of his birth, subsequent to his birth. For instance, what happened during infancy, what happened during his youth, what happened during the time he lived in Mecca, what happened during the time he migrated from Mecca to Medina, and then we were talking about what happened in Medina. So everything is discussed chronologically in the seerah literature, while in the hadith literature you will have aspects of his life arranged according to the different categories and different subjects. And sometimes these hadith works are arranged according to the reports from different authors and different compilers and different transmitters. So it all depends. There is another distinction between these two sources, the hadith and the seerah. The hadith is regarded to be more authentic in nature, while the seerah literature is regarded not as authentic. However, people who associated with these studies, sometimes they associated themselves either with the study of hadith, and others associated themselves with the study of seerah. Sometimes what would happen, they would associate themselves with the study of both hadith and seerah. So many people who studied hadith would also study seerah, and I'm not talking about the study in the manner we do it, those who specialize, those who produced information and passed it on to the next generations. They sometimes used to be specialists in hadith and also used to be specialists in seerah. So we've learned about the three main sources from where information about Prophet Muhammad ﷺ can be attained, from the Quran literature, the hadith literature and the seerah literature. The Quran, the hadith and the seerah. However, we must not assume that it is only through one type of information or one source that we can have a completely comprehensive picture of the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ. We have to combine all these three together to have a true picture of the life and times of the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ. Now, who was Prophet Muhammad? Obviously, you have lots of information about that. But according to all accounts which are authentic and accepted by all Muslim scholars, up until the age of 40, he was known to his people as a decent man. He was not considered then as a statesman. He was not considered as a preacher, nor was he considered as an orator. He was never seen discussing principles or theories associated with metaphysics, ethics, law, politics, economics, or sociology. He possessed an excellent character. He had very charming manners and was highly cultured. But even at an early age, we do not learn about his characteristics in the sense that they were not deeply striking. And his characteristics were not radically extraordinary that people would expect something great and revolutionary from him in the future. What would he do in his early days? His custom was to retire in a nearby cave. The cave was known as Hira, and in that cave he used to think and meditate. This was not unusual, for other people used to do this as well in his time. But it was during one particular month of Ramadan that he received revelation from God, and this was the beginning of his transformation. Now we learn quite a bit about him, so several questions need to be asked here. First of all, as we know that he was a cultured person, he was also known to be truthful and trustworthy. These were two of his titles right from the beginning. He was known as Sadiq, which means truthful, and Amin, which means trustworthy. So what we need to ask is it possible for a person known and respected for his honesty and trustworthiness to announce suddenly that he is the prophet of God and then begin to call upon his people to abandon their old lives and beliefs for new ones? Also, we need to ask this question, that if he were a false prophet, why did he suffer through all the hardships that his people imposed upon him? And why, when his people offered to accept him as their king and to lay all their riches of the land at his feet, if only he would cease and desist, did he refuse to do so? Why did he continue to preach Islam in the face of all kinds of insults? Social boycott, which also took place in the Meccan period, and even physical assault by his own people. These are some of the questions we need to ask. Is it not proof of his prophethood that despite being unlettered, that is also another one of his titles, that the Prophet Muhammad was unlettered? The Quran time and time again describes him as the unlettered prophet. That despite being unlettered and having led a very normal and quiet life for 40 years, that all of Arabia stood in awe and wonder of his wonderful eloquence and oratory when he began to preach Islam. And above all, why did he even lead a harder life after gaining power and authority? Just ponder the words that he uttered when he was dying. We, the community of the prophets, do not inherit. All that we leave is for charity. Why do Muslims study his life? There are several reasons. Some are as follows: to increase their faith, to increase their love for him, to increase their knowledge, to learn about his followers and companions. They study it sometimes with the intention to imitate and follow him. They sometimes study the seerah and the life of the Prophet to become close to their Creator. What aspects of his life have been studied? That is another question. We learn just about every aspect of his life have been studied and have been researched. We have the elementary types of study which are presented for infants and children. We have more technical work for adults and older people. Specialists provided compendiums. We have the likes of Ibn Ishaq, who was a very renowned scholar. His name is synonymous with the specialization of the biography of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Ibn Ishaq is a traditional early scholar. We have the likes of Ibn Hisham, Waqidi, Tabari, Ibn Kathir. The list is endless. These were scholars lived centuries ago who wrote compendiums and biographies and seerahs of the Prophet Muhammad alayhi salatu wasalam. And they are the originals. The later ones are derived from these compendiums that I've just put forward to you. Some of the areas which have been looked at are as follows. When we discuss the seerah of the Prophet and when it has been discussed in the sources, the pre-Islamic era has been discussed, his birth, childhood and early life has been discussed, his miracles have been discussed, his physical appearance has been discussed, sometimes all incorporated into one particular compilation, sometimes separate. His personality has been discussed, his marriages, his family life, his position as a politician, his migration from Mecca to Medina, and also from Mecca to Abyssinia, which also took place during his time. The devotion of his comrades and companions towards him is also discussed. We also learn about aspects of the Meccan period, aspects of the Medinan period. We learn about the first constitution that was written in Islam. We learn about the military campaigns. We learn about the letters to monarchs. We learn about the conquest of Mecca, the farewell Hajj, the farewell speech, and we also learn about incidents prior and subsequent to his death. These are just some of the aspects of the information that are found in works of Sirah. And in front of me, I've got the titles of some works and some of the headings that have been put forward by well-known scholars. Not only Muslim scholars, but non-Muslim scholars as well. We have the likes of Montgomery Watt writing about him. We have Ibn Kathir's work presently in English, which is known as As-Sirah An-Nabawiyya, which has been translated by Professor Trevor Lagassic. We have Tariq Jan's work, known as The Life and Times of Muhammad Rasulullah. Zakaria Bashir, he has two compilations regarding the Sirah. One is known as The Sunshine at Medina. The other is known as The Meccan Crucible. Michael Cook has written a work on the Prophet Muhammad known as Muhammad. We have other works such as the work by Haykal, The Life of Muhammad. We also have Nadwi's work known as Mercy for the World. The list is endless. Now, when we talk about the way of life, if we analyze the history of Islam, everybody in the earlier era, subsequent to the demise of the Prophet Muhammad alayhi salatu wasalam, they sought legitimacy in the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam. That's why there was a time when lots and lots of hadith and traditions of the Prophet were fabricated. Everybody wanted to consider their life and their way of thinking the authentic way of thinking, and they used to seek legitimacy in the life of the Prophet Muhammad alayhi salatu wasalam, and they would then say, whatever we are doing, the Prophet Muhammad alayhi salatu wasalam used to do. That's why we have a lot of factions. Maybe you would have heard of these names somewhere at some time. We had the faction known as the Khawarij, the Shia, the Qadariyah, the Mu'tazila, and even today we have all sorts of different factions. In fact, we learn about the different scientists within the Islamic studies circle. They also believed that whatever they were doing it according to what the Prophet ﷺ taught. We have then the science of tafsir, known as exegesis. We have the science of fiqh, which we call law and jurisprudence. We also have the science of hadith. And hadith, I have mentioned to you, the biographical dictionaries as well, which were compiled by many scholars. Everybody sought legitimacy in the Prophet Muhammad alayhi salatu wasalam. I just want to touch upon some of the medieval thinking about the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam. Not from a Muslim perspective, from a non-Muslim perspective. Muslims would say that, first of all, when people used to study the Prophet Muhammad, there was the age of ignorance. Christians would say that Christianity was the truth. Therefore, no truth lay outside the church. With this line of thinking, nothing of Islam could be accepted. This is the medieval approach. And therefore, hence, Prophet Muhammad, according to this way of thinking, would be a false prophet. Then there was a slight improvement. Age of reason and hope. Revelation lay only in Christianity. Since Quran contained aspects of Christianity and Judaism, it had some truth, but derivative, not absolute. more advancement, the last stage, there's more advancement, but not complete according to Muslim thinking. The moment of vision, we can term that as study of Islam as a philosophical system. So non-Muslims studying Islam and the life of the Prophet Muhammad as a philosophical system. This too was recognized as Holy Greek and seen as derivative, although an improvement, but revelation, spirituality, or divine origin by implication was denied. Now, what are the problems in misinformation and misrepresentation or misunderstanding? For instance, Muslims sometimes become incensed. If there is a picture of the Prophet Muhammad portrayed anywhere, Muslims will become furious. A book in India with a picture of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam was published called 100 Wars. In the 50s, we learned that 90% of all books about Islam were written by non-Muslims. Edward Said, a scholar, says in 1979 he could trace 60,000 books written about Islam by non-Muslims. And this is only those books that would distort the true picture of Islam. There was also an article in the Daily Express a couple of years ago with an image of the Prophet Muhammad alayhi salatu wasalam, which enraged Muslims. So what happens? These sort of things happen, and what are the implications of doing this? In a society and in an era where Islamophobia meaning the fear of Islam, is rampant, the true picture of Islam is distorted. And hence, what is happening, a false image of Muslims and Islam is put into the minds of people either deliberately or unknowingly. In the media, if you analyze and assess some of the statistics about how Islam and Muslims are portrayed, you will be surprised. There are people who analyze TV programs, and we're not talking about documentaries. When we categorize all the different TV programs, we can probably categorize some that would fall into entertainment, comedy, whatever. In the entertainment section, there would be dozens of examples within a week where Islam would be demonized, Muslims would be demonized. And this, as time is passing, is becoming more and more common. For instance, if a Muslim was to commit a crime, the name of Islam would be used straight away. If a person who was not a Muslim, say a Christian or a Jew or whatever, and he was to commit a crime, the term Christian or Jewish or Jew would not come into the equation. Another example of Muslims having to face the consequences of misinformation and misrepresentation of Islam and Muslims is that a person with the name of Muhammad gives his own story, and he says that life became easier for him after he anglicized his name. When he changed it to an English name, life became easy for him. Lots of Muslims are having to do that. So I just want to conclude with a discussion that took place between Heraclius and Abu Sufyan. Abu Sufyan had not embraced Islam. This we're talking about during the life of the Prophet Muhammad alayhi salatu wasalam. And Heraclius, as you will know, was a great ruler of that particular era. Now Abu Sufyan wanted to condemn the Prophet Muhammad. He did not believe in his message. He did not believe in what Muhammad ﷺ was preaching to his people, and he belonged to that community. He was one of the people that lived in Makkah Mukarramah, and he did not accept the Prophet Muhammad's message at that time, and he was in the company of Heraclius. And Heraclius, because the Prophet had invited the rulers of his era to Islam and given them all an invitation, Heraclius wanted to know more about the Prophet Muhammad, and so he learned that Abu Sufyan, a leading member of the Meccan people, was in that locality. So he called him over and he asked Abu Sufyan a few questions about the Prophet Muhammad. Now, we learn also that Abu Sufyan was an enemy, but he did not want to lie about the Prophet Muhammad, lest he would then not be considered as trustworthy in his eyes. So these are some of the questions. Heraclius asked Abu Sufyan about the Prophet's lineage. He said that he was from the best lineages. Anybody else make a claim before him to prophethood? He replied in the negative. Are there any kings in his family? No, he said. Who followed him? Did the weak follow him or the noble follow him? He replied that the weak and poor followed him and are following him. Are their numbers increasing or decreasing? He said that the Muslims are growing in number. He also asked, do they despise him and leave? He replied, no. He also asked, Heraclius asked Abu Sufyan, did he lie before this claim? He replied again in the negative. Did he ever break his word? Not yet, he said. He thought when he can probably get some negative information to Heraclius, why not give it a try? He said, not yet, but let us see what he does in the future. Did you fight? He asked. He said, yes. He said, what were the results? He replied that the results varied. What does he teach? Heraclius asked. He teaches to worship one God, not to associate with him. He also teaches about prayers. He also teaches to be virtuous, truthful, and kind to kinsmen. Now, Heraclius' response to all this was the following. He said, prophets always come from the best lineage. When he asked about any other claim before him, he was answered with a negative answer. He said, if a claim was previously made, he may have been imitating somebody before him. He asked Abu Sufyan also about a king being in a family. So in respect to this, Heraclius said, if there were a king, he would have been trying to revive a lost kingdom. In relation to his truthfulness, he said, a man cannot be truthful to people and lie to God. In relation to whether the weak and poor or the rich are following him, Heraclius said, poor people always initially follow the prophets. When he asked about the increment in numbers, he said, in relation to this, faith always increases until it is triumphant. He also mentioned that the faith, once settled in the heart, never leaves it. And finally, he mentioned that the prophets never break promises. So this was a discussion that Heraclius had with Abu Sufyan. And to finally conclude, I'm just quoting some comments of well-known writers and authorities. For instance, we learn about Mahatma Gandhi, the renowned ruler of India. We learn in an article that was published in Young India in 1924. He said about the Prophet Muhammad, "When I closed the second volume, I was sorry there was not more for me to read of that great life." We learn about the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ from Michael Hart's renowned book, The 100, a ranking of the most influential persons in history, which was published in 1978. He says, "My choice of Muhammad to lead the list of the world's most influential persons may surprise some readers and may be questioned by others, but he was the only man in history who was supremely successful on both the religious and secular level. Bosworth Smith in Mohammedanism, which was published in 1874, it says, "He was Caesar and Pope in one, without a standing army, without a bodyguard, without a palace, without a fixed revenue. If ever any man had the right to say that he ruled by divine right, it was Muhammad, for he had all the power without its instruments and its support." Thomas Carlyle mentions in Heroes in Hero Worship and the Heroic in History, "The lies which well-meaning zeal has heaped round this man are disgraceful to ourselves only." There was also an article in The Guardian which reads as follows: "We can enrich each other if we choose to embrace our essential humanity. We can destroy the world if we choose to stress our differences." So when we're talking about the Islamic way of life, essentially it evolves around the life of the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, in the words that he laid down for us, in the deeds that he performed, and also the vast literature that we have at our disposal for us to study. And he, according to the Muslims, is the final prophet, and for a Muslim it is essential not only believe in the Prophet Muhammad, but also to believe in all the prophets that preceded him. In fact, a Muslim believes that there are approximately over 100,000 prophets that were sent by Allah wa Ta'ala, and it is essential for him to believe in all of them. Jazakallah.